A desire for peace of mind and happiness is a strong enough driving force that it can twist your own perspective, as it is something that most people long for and work hard to achieve in many different ways. And this theme of trying to achieve or understand happiness is heavily tied with Moriocho itself, and the people who live in it, no matter which universe we're talking about. And it rings especially true in the mind of the Higashikata's oldest son, Jobin Higashikata, who, thanks to his upbringing, views happiness as heavily tied with success. Thus, he strove to do anything to ensure that the Higashikata family would always come out on top. Jobin Higashikata is one of the major antagonistic forces in the entire story of JoJolion, acting mostly in the background throughout a lot of the majority of the part, though he exclusively works in the favor of his family and their legacy, and no one else, as Jobin not only opposes Josuke, but the other rock humans in the story, and this is all thanks to how his mother raised him as a child. He also works desperately not only to save his own son Tsurugi, but to fully break the curse that has been haunting his family for years with the evolved Locacaca, and within arm's reach of his goal, calamity finally struck him. But before we get too deep into that, let's first understand the meaning behind his name and design. Jobin Higashikata, like all names in JoJo, carry with it a specific meaning, starting first with its likely origins, as it would seem that Jobin's name is in reference to the Brazilian musician and father of bossa nova, Antonio Carlos Jobim, who is also known as Tom Jobim, with the name Jobim being very important to his family history, as it tied him to an upper-class senator and personal physician of Emperor Dom Pedro II, this being Jose Martins de Cruz Jobim. Antonio also retained his name beyond his mother's divorce from their father, and thanks to his mother remarrying, Antonio also began his music career and revolutionized Brazilian music. Now, aspects of Tom Jobim and Jobin have overlap, from Jobin being born both into a decorated family like the Higashikatas, along with the connection between son and mother being very important for their lives, as the actions of their mother completely shape their lives for the future. Though, besides the musical reference, Jobin's name in Japanese is comprised of two specific characters. These characters essentially mean constantly or endlessly, and then when you mix them together with a second character which means alert, you get a name that means constantly alert, which actually works very well with his characterization, as while he is carefree on the surface, he's the only member of the family who is aware of the Locacaca trade and helps funnel money towards their business, but also his role later in the story where he abandons his carefree attitude and breaks from the main villain group to forge his own path, effectively fighting two sides at the same time, and remaining constantly aware of each of their actions. And the thing that helped him maintain his position in the story was his stand, Speed King. Speed King is a short-range humanoid stand with a face that resembles a very classic leather biker cap with goggles, which has existed since the early 50s, and made particularly famous by Glenn Hughes' own character in The Village People, Leatherman. Along with this, it has two hook-like shapes hanging down from the side of its face, which could be in reference to the straps on old leather biker caps, but also match a very particular style of facial hair called mutton chops, popularized again by bikers. Beyond its face, the body of Speed King is rather emaciated and robotic-like, similar to that of a mannequin, though its lower body is a particular mystery, as it's suggested to be similar to its upper body in certain panels and suggested to be way less in others. Though I should mention one weird thing about Speed King. Now, Speed King is a stand that has gone through some design changes, made most apparent in its arms and body, which is actually rather normal as parts of JoJo go, because Araki likes to refine his stand designs as things go on. Soft and wet at the beginning of the part doesn't look like soft and wet at the end, and that's fine, but Speed King's changes are very noticeable. Also, from the looks of it, Araki doesn't really like drawing Speed King either, as a lot of its later appearances are actually reuses of previous art put into these panels, with some refinement. Also, we see in interviews with Araki at the time during this era of JoJolion, he had a pinup of Speed King's design on a cover art, which makes me think that this is one of those designs that he needed a constant reminder to get right, or I could be reading a little bit too into this. I just noticed these things about Speed King's design and I thought it'd be interesting to point them out. Now, the main body might be depicted this new way with its more emaciated state to represent its incredibly limited activation range, this being 10 centimeters or a little under 4 inches. Activation range is not the same as effective range, which makes Speed King's major ability so deadly, and this ability is heat stockpiling. How heat stockpiling works is Jobin assigns a target, be it living or non-living, and then focuses on a portion of that target. He can then begin to stockpile heat into that area by controlling the flow of heat, creating an unusually hot portion on his target, with the hottest that we've seen being 300 degrees Celsius or around 570 degrees Fahrenheit. Though Jobin does seemingly control how hot something can get, as he is able to use this ability to knock people out without having to fully kill them. And he was even able to mess with Josuke by causing him to have a dry air nosebleed by flaunting something so hot around his face. Though what makes Speed King terrifying is that if someone were to touch the targeted object or person, the heat would begin to flow into them, traveling up their body and usually into their heads, trying to reach a thermal equilibrium. But given the sheer amount of heat that is flowing through their vital areas, this usually ends up killing the target instantly. This is due in part to the second law of thermodynamics, which states, when a hot and cold body are in thermal contact, they exchange heat until they reach thermal equilibrium. And with the sheer amount of heat that Jobin can store into a single object, for the world to try to achieve this equilibrium, it dumps a massive amount of heat into a person at a time. Which, given the usage of the term flow used to describe this ability, it seems to be done to tie Jobin together with all the major factions trying to vie for control in JoJolion. It would appear that Speed King can also use heat stockpiling to ignite combustible chemicals like kerosene. Beyond this, its connection to heat is also represented in its own stand cry, which it actually has two. The first being Spee or Spia, which is simply Speed King shouting the first portion of its name, along with like an action grunt like "Yeah!" But beyond that, you also have Maria Ria Ria, which is actually a clever usage of Japanese onomatopoeia. Maria is the sound of burning flame. Now, the name Speed King comes directly from the Deep Purple song Speed King, released in 1970 on Deep Purple's The Rock album. The song itself was an instant hit among fans and became a go-to opener for Deep Purple in the years to come, before eventually the band moved to replace the song with a different hit called Highway Star. The name itself is likely selected as a part of Rocky referencing his older work, this being the minor antagonist from Part 4, Yuya Funagami, who had a stand named Highway Star but would wear a scarf that had the words Speed King embroidered on it. This is also likely why Speed King has a biker-like aesthetic, as Yuya was a biker. But outside of the referential work, be it both musical or self, Speed King also had its name chosen to play with the stand naming theme of the Higashikata family, where each member would have the word King somewhere in the name of their stand, with Speed King being in reference almost directly to the King of Spades, as Speed and Spade are spelled almost exactly the same way in Japanese, which actually leads me to the meta-symbology of Jobin and his connection to the King of Spades. So, on chapter 47, we see Jobin holding a case with the King of Spades on it, doubling down pretty hard on the connection itself. So the King of Spades is a card that represents someone who is wise, works hard, and is full of potential, but is prone to self-destruction if they overextend themselves, which I feel fits his role very well, especially when you factor in the fact that Jobin was a member of the Locacaca trade and acted as a gopher for rock humans while quietly gathering resources from within their organization to use for his own purposes, and in doing so, Jobin successfully navigates his way into a position of power all to his own design. But in his moment of greatness, he loses his way, overextends himself, and ends up dying. It also works well with his tarot interpretation of those cards as well, as the King of Spades translates to the King of Swords, and more specifically, the reverse King of Swords, given Jobin's role as an antagonist. This card represents the idea of someone who possesses something called quiet power, where they are not the leader of a group or even the most well-spoken, but still help maintain control and/or control things from the shadows. They also hold some importance to others and stand firm to their own beliefs no matter the opposition. It's also said that those with quiet power, or those who represent a reverse king, tend to use big words to come off as stronger or smarter than they actually are, which is a reading that matches beautifully with Jobin's character, as not only is Jobin an embodiment of quiet power, given his status as a gopher for the Locacaca trade, and how he's been funneling money and gathering resources for the Higashikata family, essentially influencing both parties while being the leader of neither. But Jobin is often seen quoting famous Japanese poets like Mitsuo Aida, which tries to make him come off as philosophical or smart, when in reality he was doing so to try to sound cool. He's also very steadfast in his beliefs and refuses to let anyone interfere with his climb to the top, as from his perspective, all humans are born at a base level or from a 0 point, and the only way for someone to achieve happiness is to climb from where they started and go higher on the rung of success, which is an idea taught to him by his mother, Kato Higashikata, as when Jobin was very young, he was incredibly meek. Being unable or unwilling to stand up for himself, Jobin was forced into terrible situations time and time again, until finally he refused his placement in the world and was nearly killed for it. Though in this moment of danger, it helped him awaken to his stand, crippling his attacker in retaliation. Though after a panic and conversation with his mother, he was informed that it was not his fault, as this world had taken so much from him by dealing him this cursed hand that he wasn't responsible for fighting back. And they used this bully's crippled body to clean Jobin of his curse, and that night gave him a brand new perspective on life. From that day on, he began indulging in all of his vices to his heart's content, but soon his mother would be arrested for the murder of that bully, and Jobin would again be on his own. And it was here that he started to notice the decline in power that the Higashikatas were facing. Though it was only currently the small things, like not being able to flaunt their influence to get good seats at a baseball game or tables at a restaurant, he felt that the Higashikatas were slowly being pushed out of Moriocho's legacy, and that's when he was approached by the Locacaca trade. They would offer him an amazingly high-paying job, which they could use to then funnel money into their family's business and maintain their status, all the while allowing him to live the life of vice again. As not only would he be traveling the world, but also buying whatever he wants. I mean, he literally owned a golden Lamborghini and had a collection of very expensive rare beetles. He sort of fell into a man-child trapping, as his earlier life forced him to mature so early that he was living out a lot of his lost childhood now. He lived each day like it was summer vacation, but his life wasn't going anywhere, so he needed to climb that ladder of success. But that's when Gappy entered the picture and started destroying his life's work. As Josuke's close tie to that organization, and Deimos specifically, led to the death of every member of the Locacaca trade outside of Jobin, who then started using the resources that he had gathered to try to remove Josuke from his life. Though, in the process, he was approached by the TG University Hospital research team, or more specifically, Poor Tom, and not only learned about the new Locacaca, one that could save his family, but was also offered essentially the same position he had with the trade. But when Poor Tom's ability started to harm his family, Jobin realized that he had been used by these people. Knowing now that he couldn't work with them anymore, he decided to begin calling his own shots. Together with Tsurugi, Jobin claimed victory over both the rock humans and Josuke by gathering not only the new Locacaca, but also grafting it to a cactus that he got to keep in storage, hidden from everyone else. And this victory only fueled Jobin's ego, as he had successfully gone against the odds and taken a step up the ladder to happiness. And you can see this excitement on display in his later interactions with his wife. In a way, Jobin has gone from this reverse King of Swords to the upright one. He has now gained true power. But soon he learned that those who stand out become subject to the flow of calamity. As Jobin's desire to break free from tradition and take control of his life and fight the natural order moved him away from his principles. The man that he would often quote, Mitsuo Aida, that man is renowned for his role in Zen Buddhism, being even titled the Poet of Zen, which Zen is a practice of self-restraint and understanding of both the nature of the mind and things. Jobin found himself caught up in his obsession of escaping his own impending fall that he lost sight of his Zen, meaning that he moved into the flow of calamity. And in his new position of power, and the deadline growing closer, he became more and more concerned with people trying to stop him, resulting in a more cold and calculated persona. He had finally fully grown up, and this is actually best represented by him forcibly taking the patriarchal role of the family for himself by using Speed King to cripple his own father. Though his time in this role is rather short-lived, as his confidence had blinded him to the warnings from his wife about the oncoming calamity, resulting in him going blow for blow with the head doctor, which caused a butterfly effect that resulted in Jobin's heart getting pierced with the tubing of an aerosol can, which then saw him losing so much blood in a rapid succession that he lost balance and ultimately fell backwards, resulting in the heavy potted cactus embedding the tubing deeper into his heart. This is how Jobin died, but his death was not for nothing, as it motivated his mother to avenge him, and in a way, their combined efforts saved Tsurugi and cured the curse from the Higashikata family. Jobin, in a way, led to the Higashikata's own path to victory, It was just one that he would never get to see. Though, at the end of the day, Jobin can be seen in many ways as a force or flow of nature. From his stand to their adaptability, Jobin shows how dangerous the natural flow of things can be, but also demonstrates how impossible of a task it is to try to control that natural force. And he, along with Toru, exist as great foils to Josuke as a character in different ways. And because of that, Jobin has become one of the most interesting characters in all of JoJolion. He essentially is your classical Icarus story of a man who flew too close to the sun and got burnt. And with that all said and done, I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you want to see more videos like it in the future, I have a Patreon at patreon.com/MediNotTheBadGuy. Every little bit helps keep this channel flowing as smoothly as it does. And if you want to begin storing heat into a single place on your body, well, you can do so by buying a copy of Shimonetta, A Boring World Where the Concept of Dirty Jokes Doesn't Exist at buyshimonetta.com.